Hey there, Libras. I'm Isaac. Welcome to my channel. So I'm going to shuffle up these cards and we'll get started. Um, Putting the sort of disclaimer at the beginning of my videos, I don't tend to do a lot of like love, relationship, soulmate, twin flame type readings. I try to kind of been doing this for a long time, and frankly, I'm a little tired of talking about that stuff. So really, what we're going to focus on is spiritual, psychological development, evolution, that sort of thing. The spiritual growth, transcending the ego, that sort of thing. So if that's what you're interested in, then stick around and you might enjoy this. The Chariot is your first card here on the surface. Seven of Wands, or sorry, Swords, Seven of Swords, sorry. Five of Cups at the root. The Death card, along with that Five of Cups. Two of Swords. Queen of Swords. And for the advice, we have the Six of Pentacles and the Eight of Wands. So let me just take a look at this here for a second. So on the surface, the Chariot here with the Seven of Swords, this is kind of can kind of represent, let's just explain one at a time. The Chariot is kind of this idea of like, if you imagine that your reality is actually like almost like a simulation, that like it seems like when you're walking down the street that you're walking, that there's the earth and that you are walking through from one space to another. But imagine that that's not actually quite the case, and that what's really happening is that you are not actually moving at all. That's an illusion. That the reality is that the simulation screen around you is moving around you, giving the illusion of being in this material world and having things move around you. So that's kind of one of the things that the Chariot represents. Like you are in your little chariot, and and it's kind of and the world is moving around it. So it doesn't seem like that's what's happening, but on the sort of deeper, sort of esoteric level, that's really what's happening. But you have a lot of doubt about this, I think, and maybe you kind of entertain this idea at times, but you question it, and maybe there's times where you're really into it, and you're like, into this like manifestation thing, into the idea that the universe has its own sort of direction that it's trying to push you in, but there could be fears and doubts about it. That where maybe you kind of flip flop a little bit, the famous Libra flip flopping, um, where it's like one day it's like everything's just material and there's everything's just control and it's just like normal, the kind of the same sort of mentality that most people kind of have. Like if I don't control and make things happen in my life, then it will never happen. And then there's the other side of things where it's like manifestation, um, this more spiritually oriented kind of stuff. So you might kind of flip flop back and forward because certain things happen in life that maybe just you don't quite understand. And sometimes it's like, oh, look at that synchronicity and how magical this world is. And then the next day you're kind of like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'm just fooling myself. This isn't really how it works. But really at the core here, what's happening is that there's a kind of an emotional wound that is hiding underneath the surface. And it kind of, I think if I were to, there's no cards saying this, but like what's kind of just coming to mind right now as I say this is that it has to do with self-doubt. It's not actually doubt about what's happening. It's actually doubts about your own ability to perceive what's really happening in the world. And you're transforming this. You're letting go of this, and this process can be a little bit turbulent and crazy because we can. What's really happening is that an aspect of your identity is being challenged, but this part of your identity is not something that you chose consciously. It's something that kind of you were programmed with. You were given from birth, or from your parents, or from the culture around you, from your school. Something happened to where you develop this sort of self-doubt, and so then this manifests as you think you pay attention to what's happening in your world, in your life, and you notice certain patterns and the way certain things happen, and you kind of come up with your own ideas about how things are working. But then maybe you interact with other people that you care about, and they're like, oh, that's silly, that's stupid, that's not, that new age stuff is nonsense, you don't want to believe that. And then maybe that causes you to be like, well, maybe they're right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I can't actually see the real truth for myself, maybe I need to listen to, maybe they need a consensus agreement in order to be able to see things. But I think you're working through this self-doubt right now, and it can be kind of a painful process. Because really where this self-doubt often comes from, this question whether or not you can trust your own perceptions, that goes all the way down to your sense of self-worth. It's almost like, am I stupid? Am I good enough to be able to actually see the real truth of what's going on? And that can hurt. Self-worth is really the foundation of the psyche. Um, and it kind of spills out into every single thing you do, every situation in your life. You can find, if you learn how to read the signs and sort of, what's the word, omens, you can kind of see these symbolic representations in your life of your own self-worth, your own unconscious sense of self-worth that was given to you from your childhood being reflected to you in everywhere you go, everything you do. But you have to kind of look for it. It's not always immediately obvious. So if you have a damaged sense of self-worth, you're going to encounter a lot of situations where where it almost seems like the universe and the people around you are trying to tell you that you're not good enough. Not maybe through words, but just through situations that happen that trigger feelings of like, am I really like, am I a piece of garbage? Like, what am I? Am I stupid? Am I, these questions, like all this negative self-talk that a lot of us fall victim to. So you're processing that out right now. You're working through that, and it can be a bit difficult. And I think with this Two of Swords and Queen of Swords together here with the future, I mean, unfortunately, this does kind of say that like this can be a little harsh. Sometimes breaking through these blockages, we have a little trouble doing it on our own, um, and so we kind of need the help of these like higher intelligences, whether it be call them your spirit guides, the universe, God, the holy guardian angel, the higher self, whatever you want to call this higher essence, this higher intelligence that is underneath creation itself. It knows how to work these things out. It knows how to put you in situations where you kind of have to work through it. And I think that's kind of what's happening here, because the Queen of Swords is kind of brutal. She's not mean in the sense of just like causing pain and hurt for no reason, but like she's kind of the representation of this part of the universe that's like, this is gonna hurt, but it's got to happen, and I'm not sorry. And the Two of Swords kind of represents mental blockages, two ideas kind of clashing with one another. So I think what's really happening is like you're experiencing this like cognitive dissonance between the material worldview and this more magical worldview. There's control and force and domination and ego, and on the other side there's manifestation, magic, spirit, transcendence, and all that kind of stuff. And these two ideas are kind of butting heads, and it's cognitive dissonance like that can be frustrating, it can be difficult, it can make you feel like you're kind of going a little bit crazy. But hopefully you can learn to trust that maybe you're not crazy. Maybe you just have learned to perceive things in a way that maybe some other people that you're close to haven't. Um, and especially, I mean, if you're watching this channel in the first place, if you watch readings and you're already kind of into this more esoteric kind of stuff, then chances are you at least know some people that you probably care about who are skeptical of this sort of thing. And being a Libra, you tend to be very, your opinion can be influenced. Libra is a sign of partnerships, and there can be a tendency to overcompromise without realizing it, where you kind of compromise your own values to a certain extent or your own perceptions in order to accommodate these relationships because you care so much about them. But if you're into this, this whole spiritual journey thing, one of the most important things you're going to have to learn is self-trust, and realizing that literally nobody actually knows if they're crazy or not. How do you know they're not the ones who are crazy? How do they know they're not the ones who are crazy? Why do you think that it's automatically you who's seeing things wrong? What if it's actually them? And how can you prove it? How can they prove it? The universe is a big maybe. And I think people tend to make their best guess based on their perceptions, but we feel kind of insecure about that on our own. So we find other people who share those same beliefs. And then we create groups of people who share those same beliefs. And we say, yes, this is how it is. Now that I have all these other people agreeing with me, now I can feel confident in these beliefs. But with this sort of path that I'm talking about here, you have to learn to not need other people's, you don't need other people's to agree with your beliefs in order for you to truly, fully believe them. And like people like to say they don't care what other people think or that they don't need other people's approval. But honestly, when you really look at it, most of us still do. It's very deeply ingrained, especially if you have some kind of self-worth problem going on. It can be very sneaky, it can be very subtle, and it's easy to be in denial about that. To some extent, most of us still care, at least to some degree, what other people think. And we're talking about core foundational beliefs that spill over into every aspect of your life. So this is important stuff we're talking about. This is not just some random little thing that's just not really going to have any consequence. We're talking about the nature of how this reality works. Is it this way or is it that way? And they're opposing ideas. And so if you believe this way, the material way, that's going to inform a certain set of decisions, a certain set of ideas and ways of handling things. That's going to be completely different than this other sort of more magic oriented, spirituality kind of oriented perception. That's going to give you an entirely different set of ideas instead of, um, I'm just blanking on the word. I don't know. I'm not sure what the word was, but I think you kind of get what I'm trying to say here. And so over time, really what this requires is patience. So with the Six of Pentacles kind of is representing this idea of like, imagine that the old man there handing out the coins, that's the universe, and that you're the one sitting there kind of collecting them. You're waiting, you have to kind of witness these manifestations. You have to witness synchronicities. You have to see for yourself these situations where the universe comes in and just drops stuff in your lap that seems like it shouldn't even have been able to happen, but somehow it happens even more effectively than you could have managed on your own. When these synchronicities happen and these coincidences, these things where it's almost things become orchestrated in a way that you couldn't have managed on your own. It's like way too perfect for any human to be able to figure out how to force all the little pieces of everything together to yield a certain result. And the more you witness that, the more this momentum can build up. So this is going to take time. We're talking about a process that's not going to happen overnight. This is something that's probably going to last for a long time. You might be spending, a couple of years working on this. But it's better than not working on it at all and just being at the mercy of this sort of cognitive dissonance, this flip-flopping of ideas, of beliefs. You are working through something. There is something, a process happening in your life. And you want to trust it, I think, but it's just going to take a little while. You're going to have to just watch things happen. Just pay attention. When little coincidences and synchronicities happen in your life, pay attention to those. Don't ignore them. Don't write them off. Pay attention to them and, let yourself get a little bit excited about it. You have to see this stuff for yourself. That's the only way. No one can prove it to you. I can't prove it to you. You can't prove it to me. You can't prove it to your friends. You can only prove it to yourself. And the only way you can prove it to yourself is if you trust your own perceptions enough to not doubt what you're seeing, to not doubt your own perceptions. So it's all about self-trust, and that's connected to self-worth. And working out your sense of self-worth and improving that is really like the core, most foundational work that you can do on yourself. And when you do that, when you successfully start to transform that sense of self, that sense of self-worth, everything in your life starts to change and work differently. People interact with you differently. You attract different kinds of people. Situations start to come together in ways where instead of the universe seeming to be reflecting to you your negative self-worth and telling you that you're not good enough, all of a sudden people start treating you nicely and making you feel like you are as good as you are. And really, technically, if you think about it, every being has infinite worth. The entire concept of worth and self-worth is a complete abstraction. It doesn't exist at all. If everything in the universe is one thing, there's one divine consciousness manifesting itself in millions of different ways. How can one thing be more valuable than any other? That's completely a man-made, human-made concept that we use ultimately to measure ourselves against each other and against the situations and things in life. We have this inherent desire to measure ourselves against things because we've lost touch with the inherent sense of self-value, of self-worth that comes from just existing as a conscious being. If you didn't deserve to exist, you wouldn't. Trust me. Creation doesn't do pointless things. If you exist, it's because you need to, because you are an absolutely essential aspect of creation itself. You are a necessary perspective of the one divine mind. And when you see yourself that way, this entire concept of am I good enough or not good enough completely vanishes. So positive self-worth isn't even saying, yes, I'm really good, I'm a good person, look how wonderful I am. It's actually just dropping the entire concept altogether and recognizing that good self-worth and negative self-worth, neither one is as good as of infinite self-worth. So anyways, let me pull a few more cards here to kind of see what else comes up, and then we'll wrap this up here. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to check out my astrology videos as well. I posted a series of for all the signs of astrology videos on my channel already, so go look at those if you're interested. I do private readings also. If you're interested in those, all the information is in the description. So we have Princess of Wands, um, the Hanged Man, oops, the Devil, Six of Wands, Six of Swords. So this is kind of reiterating kind of what I've already said a little bit, just in a slightly different way. So the Princess of Wands can sometimes indicate a sense of insecurity, like not even when we hear that word insecurity, we kind of tend to think that it means like just not feeling good about yourself, and it can be, but at its core, the real sense of insecurity is like feeling unsafe in some way. So there's this sense, so like this sense of needing to be looked up to, needing other people to kind of see you as somebody who stands out above the crowd, as special in some way. This is actually rooted in a lack of there's like a sense of a material, like a biological, visceral sense of unsafety, and there's an unconscious belief that that safety will come from having lots of people looking up to you, and that's where the security comes from. Um, and that kind of probably contributes to this sort of flip-flopping and sort of these other people's opinions about the nature of reality, basically influencing your own perceptions of the nature of reality. So it is kind of rooted probably in some kind of trauma where you feel unsafe. It's a certain, the ego is a survival mechanism at its core. Um, and the Hanged Man, so this is your perception of the situation is getting dumped upside down, like, and you don't even have to do anything to make it happen. The Hanged Man. It reminds me of this saying from the Tao Te Ching that says, "When the master does nothing, nothing goes undone." It's kind of suggesting that like the universe, what happens around you, is more a product of your state of being. And when you start to realize that, you start to recognize that you don't really need to control things. You just need to work on your own sense of your state of consciousness, your baseline emotional sense of self, because that's really what determines what manifests in your life. And you don't even have to, a lot of times, you don't even have to really do anything to make it happen. Things just start getting dropped in your lap when you start to really embody this sense of security and self-worth, and of just embodying what your true nature as consciousness, of just believing in yourself, self-trust, self-worth. Things just start happening around you, and they just get dropped in your lap, and they can be orchestrated in ways to where it can be mind-blowing, to where you could try to get a group of 10 people together to try to create a situation, and it will pale in comparison to what the universe can just drop in your lap, and you don't even have to really do hardly anything to get it. This whole thing of like hard work at all costs, and that the only way to get anything is to struggle and strain. That's old, pure ego, materialistic thinking that negates the idea that life is intelligent. Of course, life is intelligent. Just, the best example is the body that you have. It is insanely complicated, and you didn't grow it on purpose. We grew these crazy complicated instruments. The brain's the most complicated thing that we know of in the known universe. And we grew them on accident. You didn't even do it on purpose. And it's just there. How could that be just a random coincidence? Just look around at the world. There's so much order and intelligence in every single thing that we see in nature, that the idea that everything's purely material and random, and just a bunch of dumb forces accidentally, randomly interacting to create all this, that's absurd. You have to be an idiot to believe that. I'm sorry. um, so anyways, this is going to take time. Six of Swords. This can feel like, oh God, just look at the people on the card. This is a long journey that they kind of want to be over. And this can also indicate some problems with the sacral chakra, which often does have to do with a sense of unsafety. So there might be a chronic sense of feeling unsafe that you're carrying around with you that kind of drives this sort of self-doubt, this questioning, this idea that you need to manipulate and control things in the world in order to allow you to feel safe. But you could actually feel safe in your body even in crazy situations. It doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to be rooted. This sense of security doesn't have to come from outside of you. In fact, that's not real security anyways, because everything outside of you is subject to constant change. So real security comes completely from within, not based on anything outside of you, not based on what people think about you, not based on what you have or where you live or anything like that. Anyways, I've been going on for a little while here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. Thanks for watching. Send me a message if you want to get into a private reading. Watch my other videos, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Take care. Talk to you soon.